Or anyone asks, no, I'm not really ready to stream yet. I just wanted to go and say I was going live so I can do a couple minor things while I'm working. Not hearing my audio though. That does not bode well. Okay, I just heard the tink of me getting a message. And the thing saying hello. To refresh my window just to see my own chat. Just seems like all sorts of appropriateness. And of course, Stream Elements put up their own post. Just Stream Elements does what Stream Elements does. But hey, that's what I expect from Stream Elements. Let's see, notifications. Let's see. Going in. Okay, not that I will ever get that free one, but no. Oh well. Let's see. Data posts. Nothing not. Oh, no. Oh, and okay, well, it did. That's good to know. Cool. And I'm still kind of lurking in the dark. It's good to look the dark. So weird. Hello. I'm gonna start here soon. I'm just, you know, not quite ready for it yet. I'm trying to finish up a couple of daily things on World of Furries. No, I'm in no way sponsored by them, but I did sponsor them, so it's only fair that I'm going to shout them out. So, World of Furries. I was one of the contributors on Kickstarter, and did both on Kickstarter and I donated directly to their site. If you look on their webpage, it is a free-to-play game. There I am. Yeah, free-to-play game, just browser. It's got some interesting stories to it. I was one of the beta testers for it. I donated to it, got my name put in the game, that kind of thing. Just because And I'm not finding these apples. Someone pops up into chat and I'm not really, paying a lot of attention. Feel free to play with one of my free sound alerts that we got going. I think about sound alerts open on my main channel. Left. And how many more apples do I need? Apples. 4 more freaking apples. Oh well. That's just fine. Yeah, and disable that thing because it's just annoying. Switch over to just chatting. Yeah. So, vacation was good. It was nice to get into mountains and away from god awful Texas heat for a little while. But now I'm back in Texas and back into this god awful heat, so. It's like 102 degrees today. Could have really done without the heat. Papa Penguin is singing the final countdown on his stream. The hell? Computer? Why you gotta be Dutch? See. That's only 9:06, so I'm not getting into the reading quite yet. I see a few more people that started after me want to become affiliate because, I'm guessing they're just more likable or they have better subject matter or they just stream more often than me. Probably all of the above. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I'm put with my sound lights. Oh no, a text to speech button. I don't need that.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
Really not. Yeah. Oh crap. Oh yeah. I'll add that. Oh shoot. Dashboard. Okay, where's the text? Okay. Simple pick. Add text to speech button on your search dashboard. GPS button 3 seconds. Okay. Alerts. I'm not seeing it. Let's see. You can activate TTS alerts to the My Alerts tab of your Sound Alerts dashboard. Alerts. Okay. Dashboard. Oh, there it is. Cool. Let's move that up here. Save it. Cool. That's on the very last. Oh no, let's. Okay. Let's see what this says.
And
Text speech. Well, that didn't quite work. Sorta. Okay. Oh, it's on there now. I don't need this second code. Okay. Okay, well. One more time. No, I didn't spell that right. Well, it's still cutting off, but hey. What you gonna do with little Cale girls when you're running? Notification. Notification is this. Okay, well, nothing new. I'm posting the Twitter out because I don't really need to watch it all. I'm trying to read. And we're almost 15 minutes in. Because, 15 minutes is time to go to read, so we are at the 15, and let's switch over. Ouch. So, reading more stories out of this book, The Echoes of Southland. Oh, man. We read the entire first section the week before last when we actually opened this book. So, we are starting with part 2. And I've kind of skimmed through this a little bit, and it's got some famous names attached to it. At least, familiar names for those of us from the South. But, yeah, whatever. The title of the section is called Citizenship and Service. So, the first thing in here is a poem from William Gilmore Simms. It's not given a title, so. These old men in the wilderness, they kept the home that stood upon the Indian trail that ran for ages through the wood. And there the traveler stayed by nights, who journeyed out in quest of those rich prairie lands that make so famous all the West. I currently live in one of those prairie lands. I really wish I didn't. That's me. Alright, the first thing in here is titled Loyalty, and it was written by Woodrow Wilson. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I have come here for the simple purpose of expressing my very deep interest in what these conferences intend to attain. It is not fair to the great multitudes of hopeful men and women who press into the country from other countries that we should leave them without that friendly and intimate instruction which will enable them very soon after they come to find out what America is like at heart and what America is intended for among the nations of the world. I believe that the chief school that these people must attend after they get here is the school which all of us attend, which is furnished by the life of the communities in which we live and the nation to which we belong. It has been very touching thoughts to me sometimes to think that the hopes which have drawn these people to America. I have no doubt that many a people's soul has been thrilled by the great statue standing in the harbor of New York and seeming to lift the light of liberty for the guidance of the feet of men, and I can imagine that they have expected some ideal in their treatments they will receive, something ideal in the laws which they would have to live under, and it caused me many a time to turn upon myself the eye of examination to see whether there burned in me the true light of the American spirit, which they expected to find here. It is easy, my fellow citizens, to communicate physical lessons, but it is very difficult to communicate spiritual lessons. America was intended to be a spirit among the nations of the world, and it is the purpose in conferences like this to find out the best way to introduce newcomers to this spirit, and by that very interest in them to enhance and purify in ourselves that thing that ought to be made America great, and not only ought to make her great, but ought to make her exhibit a spirit unlike any other nation in the world. So, my interest in this movement is as much an interest in ourselves as in those whom are trying to Americanize. because if we are genuine Americans, they cannot avoid the infection. Whereas, if we are not genuine Americans, there will be nothing to infect them with, and no amount of teaching, no amount of exposition of the Constitution, which I find very few persons understand, no amount of dwelling upon the idea of liberty and of justice will accomplish the objects that we have in our view, unless we ourselves illustrate the idea of justice and of liberty. My interest in this movement is, therefore, a twofold interest. I believe it will assist us to become self-conscious in respect of the fundamental ideas of American life. When you ask a man to be loyal to a government, if he comes from some foreign countries, his idea is that he is expected to be loyal to a certain set of persons, like a ruler or a body set in authority over him. But that is not the American idea. Our idea is that he is to be loyal to certain objects in life, and that the only reason he has a president and a Congress and a governor and a state legislature and courts is that the community shall have instrumentalities by which to promote those objects. It is cooperative organization expressing itself in this Constitution, expressing itself in these laws, intending to express itself in the exposition of those laws by the courts. And the idea of America is not so much that men are to be restrained and punished by the law, as instructed and guided by the law. The object of the law is that there, written upon those pages, the citizen should read the record of the experience of the state and nation. What they have concluded it is necessary for them to do because of the life they have lived and the things they have discovered to be the elements in that life. So that we ought to be careful to maintain a government at which the immigrant can look on the closest scrutiny, and to which he should be at liberty to address this question. You declare this to be a land of liberty, and of equality, and of justice. Have you made it so by your law? We ought to be able in our schools, in our night schools, and in every other method of instructing these people, to show them that theirs has been our endeavor. We cannot conceal from them the fact that we are just human and as any other nation, that we are just as selfish, that there are just as many mean people among us as anywhere else, that there are just as many people here who want to take advantage of other people as you can find in other countries, just as the hell am I hearing? Okay. I was thinking with ads. Sorry. Anyway, I'll try this one again. That there are just as many people here who want to take advantage of other people as you can find in any other countries. Just as many cruel people, just as many people heartless when it comes to maintaining and promoting their own interests. But you can show that our object is to get these people and harmless, and to see to it that they do not do any damage and are not allowed to indulge the passions which would bring injustice and calamity at last upon a nation whose object is spiritual and not material. America was built up on the great body of wealth. America has become, from the physical point of view, one of the most powerful nations in the world, a nation which, if it took the pains to do so, could build that power up into the most formidable instruments into the world, and one of the most formidable instruments of force, but which has no other idea than to use its force for ideal objects, and not for self-aggrandization. We have been disturbed recently, my fellow citizens, by certain symptoms which have shown themselves to be our body politic. Certain men, I have never believed in great number, born in other lands, have in recent months sought more of these lands than they have of honor and interest in the governments under which they are now living. They have gone far as to tear apart in spirits and in organization from the rest of us to accomplish some special object of their own. I am not here going to utter any criticism of these people, but I want to say this, that such thing as an absolutely incompatible with the fundamental idea of loyalty, and that loyalty is not a self-pleasing virtue. I am not bound to be loyal to the United States to please myself. I am bound to be loyal to the United States because I live under its laws and am its citizen. And whether it hurts me or whether it benefits me, I am obliged to be loyal. Loyalty means nothing unless it has at its heart the absolute principle of self-sacrifice. Loyalty means that you ought to be ready for sacrifice everything interest that you have, and your life itself if your country calls upon you to do so. And that is the sort of loyalty which ought to be inoculated into these newcomers. That they are not to be loyal only so long as they are pleased, but that, having once entered into this sacred relationship, they are bound to be loyal whether they are pleased or not, and that loyalty which is merely self-pleasing is only self-indulgence and selfishness. No man has ever risen to the real stature of spiritual manhood until he has found it is finer to serve somebody else than it is to serve himself. These are the conceptions which we ought to teach the newcomers into our midst, and we ought to realize that the life energy of every one of them is part of our schooling, and that we cannot preach loyalty unless we set the example, that we cannot profess things with the influence upon others unless we practice them also. The process of Americanization is going to be a process of self-examination, a process of purification, a process of rededication into the things of which America represents and is proud to represent. And it takes a great deal more courage and steadfastness, my fellow citizens, to represent ideal things than to represent anything else. And that was Woodrow Wilson, a president, before he became president. That cool. Anyway, next up we have a poem called The Swamp Fox by William Gilmore Simms. We follow where the swamp fox guides, his friends and merry men are we. And when the troop of tarleton rides, we burrow in the cypress tree. We certify tustock in our bed, our home is in the red deer's den, our roof the treetop overhead, for we are wild and hunted men. We fly by day and shun its light, but, prompt to strike the sudden blow, we mount and start with early night, and through the forests track our foe, and soon he hears our chargers leap. The flashing saber blinds his eyes, and ere he drives away his sleep and rushes from his camp, he dies. Free bridle bit, good gallant steed, that will not be a kind caress, to swim the Santee at our need, when he on heels the foeman press. The true heart and the ready hand, the spirit stubborn to be free, the twisted boar, smithing hand, and we are Marion's men, see. Now light the fire and cook the meal, at last, perhaps, that we shall taste. I hear the swamp fox round his steel, and that's a sign we move in haste. He whistles to the scouts, and hark! You hear his order calm and low. Come, wave your torch across the dark, and let us see the boys that go. We may not see their forms again. God help 'em should they find the strife. For they're strong and fearless men, and make no coward terms for life. They'll fight as long as Marian birds, and when he speaks the word to shy, then not till then they turn their steeds through thickening shade and swamp to fly. Now stir the fire and lie at ease. The scouts are gone, and on the brush I see the colonel bend his knees to take his slumbers too, but hush. He's praying, comrades, 'tis not strange. The man that's fighting day by day may well, when night comes, take a change, and down upon his knees to pray. Break up that hoe cake, boys, and hand the sly and silent jug that's there. I love it not, should idle stand, when Marion's men have need to cheer. 'Tis seldom that our luck affords the stuff like this we just have quaffed, and dry potatoes on our boards may always call for such a drop. Now pile the brush and roll the log, hard pillow in the soldier's head. That's half the time in brake and bog, must never think of softer bed. The owl was hooting to the night, the cooter crawling over the bank, and in the pond the flashing light told us where the alligator sank. What? 'Tis the signal, started so soon, and through the scented swamp so deep, without the aid of friendly moon, and we, heaven help us, half asleep. But courage, comrades, Marion leads. Swamp Fox takes us out tonight. So clear your swords and coax your steeds. There's goodly chance, I think, of fight. We follow where the Swamp Fox guides. We leave the swamp and cypress tree. Our spurs in our coursers' sides, and ready for the strife are we. The Tory camp is now in sight, and there he cowers within his den. He hears our shout and dreads our fight. He hears and flies from Marion's men. Now this next one. Oh, the Speech to Indians at Logstown by George Washington. We met in council at the Longhouse about 9 o'clock, where I spoke to them as follows. Brothers, I have called you together in council by order of your brother, the governor of Virginia, to acquaint you that I am sent, with all possible dispatch, to visit and deliver a letter to the French commandant of very great importance to your brothers, the English, and I dare say to their friends and allies. I was desired, brothers, by your brother, the governor, to call upon you, the sachems of the nations, to inform you of it, and ask your advice and assistance to proceed to the nearest and best road to the French. You see, brothers, I have gotten thus far on my journey. His honor likewise desired me to apply to you for some of your young men, to conduct and provide provisions for us on your way, and be a safeguard against those French Indians who have taken up the hatchet against us. I have spoken thus particularly to you, brothers, because his honor, our governor, treats you as good friends and allies. He holds you in great esteem. To confirm what I have said, I give you this string of wampum. Wow. Wow. Okay. Washington, everyone. For shining fathers. Next in here is another poem. The Hero of the Gun by Margaret Junkin Preston. The captain galloped to the front, the foam upon his rein, and as he urged his swerving steed across a pile of slain, he hailed the gunner at his post. "Ho, Fergus, pour your shell straight in the face of yon stout line that holds the height so well. And never slack your raking fire, no, not to cool your gun, for if we break those stubborn ranks, I think the day is won." The gunner wiped his smoke-dimmed face. "I'll do the best I can, and down, brave fellows though they be, we'll bring them to a man." "I'll trust you for it." Like a flash, the captain turned and wheeled, and with his sword above his head, dashed backward to the field. Fierce belched the cannon's ceaseless fire, with deadly crash and din, and though the line still held the height, its ranks began to thin. "2 rounds, and we will clear the hill." But as the gunner spoke, a sudden overwhelming storm of bullets over him broke. And when the smoke had lifted, there still straining all his powers, they heard him shout, "2 shots, my boys, and then the day is ours." "No matter if one arm be gone, I keep the other still. I promised I would do my best, and so you'll see I will. Let me take trial while my strength can do the duty set. I tell you that this strong left hand is good for service yet." They primed the piece, and twice he sent, with all too deadly aim, the shells that moved the broken line and swept the hill with flame. "Where's Fergus?" The captain's horse came spurring into sight. "Where's Fergus? Let him take my thanks, for his fire has won the fight." The dying gunner raised his hand. His lips were faintly stirred. "Captain, I said I'd do my best, and I have kept my word." Okay. Yeah. I think Cubs. Serious literature here. Ooh. Okay. The next story in here is His Hero by Margaret Miner. It was an October afternoon, and through Indian summer's toll-like haze and low swinging suns sent shafts of scarlet light at the highest peaks of the Blue Ridge. The sweet gum leaves looked like blood-colored stars as they floated slowly to the ground, and brown chestnuts gleamed satin-like through the gaping burrs. While over there they rested the dense stillness, cut now and then by the sharp yelp of a dog as he scurried through the bushes after a rabbit. Surrounded by the splendid autumn beauties of the mountain-top inn, near the crest of the Blue Ridge and Rockfish Gap, its historical value dating from the time when Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, after a long and spirited discussion in one of the low-ceiling rooms, decided upon the location of the University of Virginia. On the porch of this old inn there now sat a little boy, idly swinging a pair of sun-tanned legs. Occasionally he tickled an old liver-colored hound that lay dozing at his lime heap. But being rewarded only with toothless snaps at very long intervals, he finally grew tired of this amusement, and stretching himself out on his back, he began to dream with wide-open eyes. At these dream times, when he let his thoughts loose, they always bore him to the very same field, and here his fancy painted pictures with vivid colors of a boy's imagination. Pictures so strong that they left behind flushed and tingling with pride. Again, pictures that brought a cool, choking feeling to his throat, and at times pictures that made his childish mouth quiver and droop. Among all these thought-born scenes, at intervals there would stand out for real ones, scenes that were echoed into the clean walls of his memory in everlasting strokes. He never tired of thinking of that first morning, that morning when all the world seemed gilded with sunshine and throbbing with martial music. His grandfather had lifted him up on one of the big gate posts to see the soldiers march by. With mingled feelings of admiration and childish envy, they had watched them drill for many weeks, but they had never seemed such real grand soldiers until now, as they came marching by with quick, firm steps, keeping time to the clear staccato notes, marching off to the real battlefields. It was all so beautiful, splendid, and gay. The music, the soldiers, the people, the hurrahing. It stirred his sentient little body through and through with a kind of joy, and he thought it was so strange when his mother's eyes were full of tears. Just a few days later, he had listened eagerly to the sharp, cracking sound of guns, and the rumbling thunder of cannons, so near that the air seemed to vibrate. He and another little boy had stood and talked in high, quick tones, bragging and predicting breathlessly the result of the battle that they used the term "our men." Finally, they climbed the tallest oak of the lawn and strained their young eyes to see which was getting whipped. A little while after this, he remembered following his father through the long hospital ward. Over his first bed, he saw him stoop and loosen a white cotton bandage from a wounded man. On the next narrow cot, there was a slender boy of 15 who lay with clenched hands, watching the work of a surgeon. Then they passed a woman who was gently bathing the forehead of a man whose soldier days seemed likely to come to an early end. Some weeks had gone by. One day he followed a party of men to Mare's Heights. It was a short time after the Battle of Fredericksburg. The light snow had fallen the night before, which the wind had stirred, sifted about the dead, in a way that made them appear to be shuddering. Once the sharp gust blew the snow off a body lying on its face, and the boy's eyes filled. He scarcely heeded the talk of the men he had gone. His thoughts were held fast by the awful scene which lay spread before his young eyes. How often since then had the boy pictured himself, a grown man, seated on just such a fine horse and following Lee. It was always Lee in his dreamland, though the heart of the battle, he always followed General Robert E. Lee, his hero, whom he had never seen, but whom he had carried yellow-crowned in his heart ever since he could remember. And then the saddest day of his life had come, the day when the first news of Lee's surrender lay heavy on the hearts of the household. For a while he had followed his mother as she went sleep silently, with closed white lips, one duty to another. Finally, he went out to seek comfort from Uncle Jake, whom he found sitting with his back propped against the side of the corn crib, drawing little quick puffs of smoke from his pipe. "Uncle Jake," he said, "Lee's just had to surrender." "Yes, honey," as he looked at Uncle Jake's little red, watery eyes. He saw no comfort there, and turned away. 7 months had gone by since the war had ended. Still, on this October afternoon, as the boy lay stretched out on the porch of the old inn, dreamed his boyish dreams of romance and heroism. Suddenly his attention was attracted by the sound of hooves, and turning his head he saw a man riding slowly down the road. A new arrival at the inn was always most interesting. An eager light came into the boy's eyes as he watched the rider, who was now near enough to see how firmly he sat in his saddle. The man seemed a very part of the strongly built horse, which carried him with ease that indicated long habits. A wiry little negro had also seen the approaching horseman and was now hurrying across the lawn to meet him. "May I spend the night here, my man?" asked the stranger. Yes, sir," answered Uncle Jake. Quickly and opening the gate, he stepped out and caught his bridle near the bit as the horseman swung out of the creaking saddle to the ground. "Uncle Jake, take the horse around to the stable," called out the boy, who felt that the honors of hospitality rested on him. There being no one else in sight. Then he ran briskly down the walk to meet the stranger, who extended his fine, strong hand with a little smile and very kindly. "How do you do, sir?" "I'm well," replied the boy. "And what is your name?" "Jimmy." "Jimmy? Well, Jimmy is a nice name," he said. Then he turned and still held the boy's hand as he watched the little old negro, who stood with his head under his saddle skirts, tiptoeing and straining with efforts to unfasten the girdle. Finally, when he succeeded, he flung the saddle to the ground, and the horse, feeling relieved of his burden, first shook himself violently, then expressed his comfort again and again in deep chest tones. During all this time, Jimmy's eyes had been fastened to the stranger's spurs, and a peculiar feeling of incredulity gradually filled his mind. Silver, indeed. He could not fool him. No one was rich enough to have real silver spurs. So sternly did he resent that he thought to be an attempt of deception that he drew his small brown hand slowly out of the stranger's gentle grasp. After slipping off the bridle of the horse's head and dropping it by the saddle, Uncle Jake led him away by its forelock to the stable. And Jimmy walked toward the inn with his guest, who said they had reached the steps. "Jimmy, we will sit here for a while, and then I will go over to the stable and see about my horse." As I sat down, the old hound came cautiously down the steps, wheezing out a husky greeting. "She's too old to hurt anyone," said Jimmy. "Is she yours?" "No, sir. Tip's mine. Listen," he exclaimed as the sharp yelp of a dog again broke the stillness. "That's Tip. Off he goes. Runs rabbits all by himself. Perhaps he's after a fox." "No, sir. Tip won't run a fox." "Jimmy, can you tell from a dog's cry whether he's running a fox or a rabbit?" "No, sir." "Well, if he is trailing a rabbit, does he not bark continuously? But if he's after a fox, he does. So you can always tell if you listen carefully." "Never heard about that before," replied Jimmy with a smile. After this, there followed a long pause, during which the stranger looked about inquiringly and said, "Jimmy, how long have you been living here?" "Not very long. We refugeed over in North Carolina the first part of the war. Then we came back to Spotsylvania County while Father was in prison. Why, we just came here after the surrender. You remember when Lee had the surrender?" he asked, looking up at the stranger's face. The boy's mouth, as usual, quivered as he uttered the word surrender, but the man did not appear to see this. He seemed to be looking at the far-off mountain peak. After a pause, he replied, "Yes, I remember." He arose as he started toward the stable. "I'll show you the way," said Jimmy. "Thank you, sir," he answered gravely. When they entered the stable, the big gray horse greeted his master with some soft nickerings. "Oh, he knows you without even looking," exclaimed Jimmy, in tones expressing delight and surprise. "Yes, he knows me pretty well," the man replied, as he looked at the anxious sympathy with the saddle dog placed in the horse's back. Jim had climbed up on the side of the stall, and was also looking in such interest. Suddenly he exclaimed, I know what good that's for. Some stuff down at the bottom of the chocolate spring. He pronounced each syllable of the word. Chelek beat very carefully, for it was a newly learned word, and he was proud of his ability to say it. Why, yes, the iron it ought to be healing. For how far is the spring? Oh, just a little way. I'll show you, Jimmy replied, jumping to the ground and quickly opening the stable door. Let me lead him. Yes. Hadn't you rather ride him, Jimmy? Yes, sir, he replied, in rather shy but pleased tones. All right, said the man, as he swung the little fellow up on the horse. There, sit further back so you will not hurt the gold place. Now lead him, and you tell me which direction to go. Down the road there, just on the other side of the ice pond, said Jimmy, pointing at the direction that moved off. The boy was happy to be cupped his bare legs close around the body of the horse, and watched the square shoulders of the man who walked slowly ahead. He thought him exceedingly nice and kind, and his feelings in regard to the spurs were not nearly so intense. The desire to ask if they were real silver, though, was strong. He felt that perhaps it would not be polite, so he said nothing. After they had gone some distance, Jamie exclaimed, There's the spring! Then he slid quickly to the ground, and without other words knelt down and, barring one arm, dipped out of the bottom of the spring a handful of rust-colored flakes. This is what you put on his back, he said. Just lay it right on. It doesn't hurt, and it feels cool. The directions were quietly obeyed, and the horse made no movement, save for a slight quiver to the skin, as if to shake off a fly. Hey, Papa Penguin. Uncle Jake says the doctors can't make any finer medicine than this, he said, as he scooped up another handful. Well, Jimmy, I'm very much obliged to you, and I'm sure that my horse is also, said the stranger, as it started on back to the stable. In the meantime, the saddle left by Uncle Jake, neat and the horse tacker, attracted the attention of a young man as he came through the front gate. After looking at it for a few minutes, an idle curiosity prompted him to turn it over to see his foot. As he did, the three brass letters, R-E-L, greeted him. He looked sharply at them at first, then his eyes dilated, and a little prickly thrill ran through him. I wonder if it can be, he said. Suddenly, some convincing feeling seemed to fill his mind, and he almost ran out of the house. On reaching the steps, he sprang up them, two of them at a time, and entered the hall where he met Mrs. Cleverly. Mrs. Cleverly, he began, and stopped. Well, she asked, smiling at his situation. What is it, Charlie? Do you know, Miss Cleverly, that I think General Lee is here? His voice was husky with excitement. General Lee? Where? But without waiting for a reply, she quickly stepped out the door in an old-fashioned parlor and exclaimed in soft, suppressed tones to a group of women sitting there. They think that General Lee is here. What makes them think so? Asked the thin, gray-haired woman, as she hastily rose. Why, replied the young man, his tones now quite positive, the saddle with Ariel, right there on the steps by the gate. There he comes now, said one of the group, easily. At least, I suppose that is he. Let me see, said Mrs. Cleverly, going rapidly to the window. I saw him once at Greenbrier White, and I'm sure I would know him. Yes, it is he, she exclaimed as she looked at the man coming slowly across the lawn, talking earnestly to a barefoot boy at his side. His thoughts were so completely occupied that he was saying that not until he was quite near the end that he noticed the group on the porch, and his face flushed slightly as he realized that they were to greet him. Lifting his hat, he ascended the steps with a bared head. Mrs. Cleverly walked quickly forward and extended her slim white hand. Generally, I believe? Yes, ma'am, he said gravely, as he bowed low over his hand. At the sound of Lee's name, Jenny's eyes grew round and filled with astonishment. For one brief moment, he stood gazing up at the stately old soldier. Everyone was greeting, and he backed slowly away until he reached the door. There he stood another moment, seeing nothing but his hero. Suddenly he turned and darted down the long hall up the stairway into his mother's room. "Mother!" he exclaimed in breathless wonderment. "Mother, General Lee is downstairs, and he is just splendid, and, he's exactly like everyone else." Wow. Man, that was a long story compared to what I'm used to. How's your game going over there? Old story. I guess letter. This one is Letter to His Daughter Martha by Thomas Jefferson. Annapolis, November 28th, 1783. Dear Patsy, after 4 days' journey, I arrived here without any incidents, and in good health as when I left Philadelphia. The conviction that you would be more improved in the situation I have placed you than still with me solaced me on my parting with you, which my love for you has rendered a difficult thing. The acquirements which I hope you will make under the tutors I have provided for you will render you more worthy of my love, and if they cannot increase it, they will prevent its diminution. Consider the good lady who has taken you under her roof, and who has undertaken to see that you perform all your exercises, and to your astonishment do, in all those wanderings from what is right and what is clever, to which your inexperience would expose you. Consider her, I say, as your mother, as the only person to whom, since the loss of which heaven has pleased to afflict you, you can now look up, and that her displeasure or disapprobation, on any occasion, will be an immense misfortune, which should you be so unhappy as to incur by an unguarded act, think no concession too much to your grand or good will. With respect to the distribution of your time, the following is what I should approve. From 8 to 10, practice music. From 10 to 1, dance one day and draw another. From 1 to 2, draw on the day you dance and write a letter the next day. From 3 to 4, read French. From 4 to 5, exercise yourself in music. From 5 till bedtime, read English, write, etc. Communicate this plan to Mrs. Hopkinson, and if she approves it, pursue it. As long as Mrs. Trist remains in Philadelphia, cultivate her affection. She has been a valuable friend to you, and her good sense and good hearts make her valued by all who know her, and by nobody on earth more than me. I expect you will write me by every post. Inform me what books you read, what tunes you learn, and enclose your best copy of every lesson in drawing. Write also one letter a week, either to your Aunt Epps, your Aunt Skipwith, your Aunt Carr, or the little lady from whom I now enclose a letter. And always put the letters you write under the covers to me. Take care that you never spell a word wrong. Always before you write a word, consider how it is spelt. And if you do not remember it, turn to a dictionary. It produces great praise to be laid to spell well, and I have placed my happiness on seeing you good and accomplished. And no distress this world can now bring on me would equal that of your disappointing my hopes. If you love me, then strive to be good under every situation and to all living creatures, and to acquire those accomplishments which I have put in your power, and which will go far towards ensuring you the warmest love of your affectionate father. P.S. Keep my letters and read them at times, that you may always have present in your mind those things which will endear you to me. Thomas Jefferson, kind of a dick of a father. No surprise there, say. Like, if you love me, you will do what I tell you, and study this way. Okay. I should just disclaimer this entire book, but I think I have, actually. This next story is A Boy Who Was Traded for a Horse by James Saxon Childers. The stooped old Negro shuffled along through the dust of the Alabama road at a curiously rapid rate. He was carrying an armful of sticks and wildflowers. The sticks I could understand, would use them for kindling, but I never before seen an old black man ambling along the road at 9 o'clock in the morning with swamp roses, wild geraniums, and creeping buttercups mingled with a lot of dry sticks. When I got a little closer to him, I saw that he was wearing a saggy coat which originally might have been green alpaca, but which the sun had faded until I couldn't be sure about the color. There were so many patches that I couldn't even be certain about the material. The old man was walking towards a large brick building, one of the buildings of Tuskegee Institute, a famous school for Negroes at Tuskegee, Alabama. His thin body bent by the years, his white hair beneath the ragged cap, he seemed pathetically lost on the campus of a great modern educational institution. Poor old fellow, I'd seen hundreds just like him, totally ignorant, unable to read and write. They shamble along the dust of southern roads in search for any little odd job that will earn enough food to keep them alive, enough clothes to cover their tired old bones. At the entrance of the building towards which we were both walking, the old Negro turned in. It's probably the janitor, I told myself. I'm sincerely glad that they've given him a job of some kind. I stepped into the hallway and saw a trim little secretary hurry toward the bent old Negro. I heard her say to him, "That delegation from Washington is waiting for you, Dr. Carver." Dr. Carver. Dr. Washington Carver, the very man I'd come to see. Fantastic and unbelievable as it seemed, this old man with an armful of sticks and wildflowers was none other than the distinguished Negro scientist of the Tuskegee Institute. I discovered renowned far and wide for his chemical wizardry in creating useful new products from such stuff as peanut shells and fallen leaves, which most of us waste and throw away. An inventor claimed for his genius in transforming such common things as peanuts, sweet potatoes, and even clay of the earth into things of uncommon value for our everyday needs. That saggy alpaca coat covered a Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, Honorary Doctor of Science, winner of the Spurgeon Medal for Negro Achievement, member of the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures, and Commerce of Great Britain. Yet I looked at him, studied his kindly face, and recalled what I had heard of the story of his life. I saw that the figure of the man himself was not half so fantastic or unbelievable as is the record of his achievement. Dr. George Washington Carver started with nothing, never had anything. Yet out of nothing he had created inestimable wealth for fellow human beings to whom he has devoted his life. Born a slave child, he began life without so much as a name. He never knew his father, never knew his mother. To this day, he doesn't know just where he was born, though his figures his age at somewhere close to 70. Without a red cent, he worked out his own early schooling, then his higher college education, then the postgraduate work for his Master of Science degree. All his life he had been joyously at work with common, everyday things, making something out of nothing, or next to nothing. During the 36 years in which he was the Director of Agricultural Research at Tuskegee Institute, that has been his work, and out of it came scientific marvels. From wood shavings, he has made synthetic marble. From peanut shells, he has made insulating walls for houses. From the muck of swamps and the leaves of the forest floor, he has made valuable fertilizers. From cow dung, he has made paint. From the common, ordinary peanut, he has made 285 useful products, including milk, butter, cheese, candies, instant coffee, pickles, sauces, oils, shaving lotions, wood stains, dyes, lard, linoleum, floor, breakfast foods, soap, stock foods, face powder, tan remover, shampoo, printer's ink, and even axle grease. From the lowly sweet potato, he has made 118 products. Among them include flour, meal, starch, library paste, vinegar, shoe blacking, ginger, ink, rubber compound, chocolate compound, dyes, molasses, wood filler, and caramels. From the clays of the earth he has made non-fading paints and pigments. From worn-out, sandy soil he has produced paying crops. Something from nothing. And this is only a portion of his work. Experts say that he has profoundly done more than any other living man to rehabilitate agriculture in the South. And more still, Dr. Carver is also an artist, especially skilled in painting flowers. His paintings have been exhibited at world fairs, and at least one is going to Luxembourg, Germany, Luxembourg Gallery in France after his death. He makes all his own paints using Alabama clays. The paper he paints he makes from peanut shells, and the frames for his pictures he makes out of corn husks. His work in embroidery and crochet has won prizes in various exhibits. He has woven gorgeous rugs with fibers he has made from cotton stalks. He is a skilled musician, too. Once he toured the Middle West as a concert pianist. And last but not least, he is an expert cook. His recipes are used today in some of the leading hotels of the country. All this does sound a bit incredible, doesn't it? I confess that when I set out for Tuskegee to see and talk to Dr. Carver, I was more and skeptical on many of these stories I had heard about it. And so, after he had entertained the visiting delegations from Washington, I returned to see him in his office in the big brick building, with many doubts lingering in my mind. He was sitting behind a desk cluttered inches high with papers and letters. On top of the papers were sticks and the wildflowers that I had just seen him carrying in this morning. As I went in, he was looking through the microscope at the stem of a wild rose. "I beg your pardon," I said. The old man raised his head and looked at me. Then, taking hold of the edge of the desk and steadying himself, he pushed himself up front the squeaky swivel chair. He wore a long canvas apron that was splotched and stained. His gold-rimmed spectacles rested far down on his nose. Standing there, so tall despite his noticeable stoop, perched over the tops of his spectacles and smiled at me. "Good morning," he said, and the quiet tone of his voice blended the gentle insincerity of his smile. In slight confusion, then, I explained why I had called on him. "People tell me that I couldn't possibly write a story about the Tuskegee unless I wrote a lot about you," I added. The old Negro grinned with his genuine shyness that kept him so long hidden from the public. "People are too kind to me," he insisted. "I'm really a very small part of this institution. Won't you sit down?" I saw his hands large, the fingers long and slender. They tremble noticeably. At close range I saw, too, that he is a Negro from the Negros. His skin black and his features remarkably negroid. His blood is unmixed with the blood of any other race. His hair and his mustache are white. His eyes joke one instant, reason the next, and with almost crushing force plead for truths that some men never understand. "Do you mind if I stay here for a while?" I asked. "I'd very much like, that is, if I won't trouble you." "It will be a pleasure, sir. A great pleasure to me." I was touched by his gentleness and by an unmistakable spiritual quality that grew low in the glow of his face. Frankly, I was confused. To open this conversation, I remarked on the numerous Maxfield Parrish paintings that hang on his office walls. "Somehow they seem a little out of place in the office of a scientist," I said lamely. "But can't a scientist be a lover of the beautiful?" he asked. "There's no one in the moderns who uses blue half as well as Maxfield Parrish uses it." And then he was off. For 45 minutes he shuffled about his office, showing me how Maxfield Parrish uses blues and telling me how the ancients used color. Quietly, even humbly, he told me how the Egyptians loved it, how they had adorned their homes and tombs with it. Then he led me from the office across the hall into his laboratory, a room about 30 by 20 feet. It was filled with racks and shelves and tables, bottles and tubes and retorts. He picked up a jar and carried it neatly to the window. "See?" and he held it to the sun. And I saw the richest, purest blue that I ever had seen. Dr. Carver was talking quietly as he tilted the jar one way or another, giving the sun a full chance to mate with the glorious color. "I believe," he went on, "that it's the rediscovery of the old Egyptian blue. A number of chemists have come to see it, and they agree with me. At the present I'm working on the Egyptian purple. I believe that soon we shall have that too." "I get my dyes," the old man continued, "from Alabama clays. You remember what the Bible says." Dr. Carver has built his life on what the Bible says. "You remember that the Bible says, 'Look to the hills from whence cometh your help.' I did it. I looked to these Alabama hills, and I made these dyes from the clays that I found there. All these dyes and paints," he waved toward the 36 boards, each of which had colored differently. "All of them were made from Alabama clay. All," he said, "except this one. It was made from rotten sweet potatoes, and this one, which was made from cow dung, and this one, much finer paint, made from horse dung. After I had been an hour in the Dr. Carver's laboratory, after I had seen rope made from okra fiber, baskets from wisteria, dyes from the dandelion, black oak, wood ashes, sweet gum, swamp maple, sweet potato, pomegranate, peanut, Osage orange, muscadine grape, onion, velvet bean, and tomato vine, after I had seen those discoveries, among a few hundred others, I was willing to believe almost anything possible to this kindly man whom apparently brick without straw would be the simple problem. When you do the common things in life as in an uncommon way, Dr. Carver once said to his attendants, you will command the attention of the world. In that sentence lies the secret of his own achievements. He was born in a rude slave cabin on the farm of Moses Carver near Diamond Grove, Missouri. Moses Carver owned his mother, and a neighbor owned his father. When he was a baby 6 months old, night riders swooped down on his master's plantation, carried away a number of slaves, among them the baby and his mother. In their flight, the raiders took no care of this child, developed a whooping cough, and was dying when emissaries sent out by Moses Carver arrived in Missouri to buy back the stolen slaves. But the mother was already taken and disposed of. No one ever learned what became of her. Indeed, there is one thing of hers that was left. In Dr. Carver's room is one of the dormitories at Tuskegee is a battered old spinning wheel on which his mother spun flax when she was a slave. A friend of Dr. Carver said to me, I've seen him touch the wheel. He touches it like a priest reverently touching the altar. I sometimes feel that if I could be in his room when he retires, I should hear the old man say good night to that wheel. The emissaries sent to ransom the stolen slaves finally struck a bargain with the night riders. The baby was evaluated and traded back to its owner. It was traded for a broken-down racehorse worth about $300. The Carvers reared the sickly child. From them he took his surname, according to the practice common among slaves. It was told that they bestowed the given name George Washington upon him because of his youthful honesty and industry. Because he was a frail and undersized lad, he could do no heavy work. He performed household chores, getting in the wood, tending the fires, and helping Mrs. Carver with the meals. He became an excellent cook, and also learned to sew and mend clothes. When the chores were done, his favorite playground was the woods nearby, where his companions were the birds, the flowers, the trees, and small animals. As a boy, he had only one book. It was Webster's Blueback Speller. With that book, he said to me, I began my education. Even as a boy, I realized that life requires thorough preparation. There's no shortcut to achievements. Veneer isn't worth anything. And so I studied that book until I knew every word of it. When he was about 10 years old, having mastered the speller, he determined to get further schooling. He heard of a school in the village from Jefferson, Missouri, 8 miles away. The Carvers wanted him to have an education, but offered him no money. So, without a cent in his pockets, he set out over the hills to Nershow. Arriving there, alone among strangers, he slept first in the old horse barn. Soon he picked up odd jobs about the village and entered the school. It wasn't much of a school, an old log cabin equipped with hard, high benches for the pupils. Within a year, he had mastered all that the teacher could tell him, and more. But he had learned enough to be eager for more knowledge. One day, while walking along the road, he met a mule team outfit headed for Fort Scott, Kansas. In true hitchhike fashion, he asked the travelers if he could go along with them. After several days' journey, they reached Fort Scott, where he got a job in a home as a cook, dishwasher, and all-around housekeeper. In this way, and by washing clothes, he earned his keep while he attended classes in high school. Still frail in physique and small for his age, he was continuing to make something out of nothing. 7 years passed and he completed his high school course. He was now in his early 20s, and almost miraculously he began to grow in body. Within a year or so he developed from a weakling to a strapping 6-footer. Without accepting financial aid, he had struggled through his schooling. Now he determined to make his way through college. But first he paid a summer visit to his old home with the Carvers back in Missouri. They gave him his mother's spinning wheel, which he carried back with him to Fort Scott. In the fall, he mailed an application to college in Iowa, and by mail he was accepted. But when he arrived at college, they refused to admit him because he was a Negro. Had spent most of his journey money on the railway fare. It was not enough to take him out of town. But he was undismayed. Again he worked at odd jobs, cooking, cleaning, and doing other chores. Before long, he had accumulated enough money to open a small laundry, which was patronized by college students and townspeople. For a time, he worked as a hotel cook. The next year, he entered Simpson College at Indianola, Iowa. After he had paid for his entrance fee and he had 10 cents left, he invested 5 cents worth of cornmeal and 5 cents worth of sweets. On this fare, he lived for nearly a week. 3 years he worked his way through Simpson. And in 1890, he enrolled in Iowa State College. 4 years later, he was graduated, taking his degree in agriculture, having earned every penny of his expenses. 2 years after graduation, he won his Master in Science degree. His work in agriculture chemistry so impressed the authorities of the college that they appointed him to a place of the college faculty. This boy, who only a few years ago had been traded for a horse. While Carver was teaching at Iowa State University, the late Booker T. Washington, the great Negro educator, heard of him and asked him to come to Tuskegee. He asked me to come there and let down by a bucket. Dr. Carver told me one day as I watched him busy in his laboratory. Turning from his work, he looked back out the window, and I saw that he was looking back through the years. I did come here, I did let down my bucket, and every time I've pulled it back up, it has been to the brimful and running overflowing over, he repeated. Bending over his microscope again, he muttered to himself, and I shall always be thankful that I am standing near enough to hear him say, God has been mighty good to this poor old Negro. Accepting Dr. Washington's call, Carver saw a great opportunity to serve his own people in the South, an opportunity for which he had fully prepared himself by his work in agriculture and chemistry. He saw that the valuable cotton lands of the South, where for years cotton had been the chief paying crop, were wearing out through neglect and simple scientific methods of farming, such as proper fertilization and rotation of crops. He saw small farmers overburdening by debts and facing poverty. He saw a way to help lift their burden. Carver's first job when he arrived at Tuskegee in 1896 was to create an efficient Department of Agriculture, which he had barely started in school. The department was housed in an old building and was almost entirely lacking in laboratory equipment. At once he put into place what he had learned about making something out of nothing. He and his students went out into back alleys and searched trash piles, collecting old bottles and jars, bits of rubber and wire and other odds and ends. Out of these, he built laboratory apparatus, later to be replaced by new equipment. His next big job was to take over and work 19 acres of the worst land in Alabama. He used this plot of ground as an experimentation station, where he proceeded to prove to the Alabama farmers that coarse sand, fine sandy loam, and clay loam could be worked profitably. If crops could be developed successfully on this patch of land, he argued, they certainly could be grown in any part of the South. 1897, when Carver began his work, the best methods of farming, combined with the abundant use of fertilizer, had produced a net loss of $16.25 an acre on this land. Within a year, he had treated the soil until it showed a net gain of $4 an acre. 7 years later, he produced 80 bushels of sweet potatoes on an acre of sandy loam. That same year, he produced another crop of the same acre. The profit was $75. The next year, he raised a 500-pound bale of cotton, that acre, and in Alabama, there weren't any acres that would bear a 500-pound bale of cotton. Profits out of barren soil. In these experiments in crop rotation during his first 12 years at Tuskegee Institute, Dr. Carver demonstrated something of inestimable value to the farmers, that by intelligence and industry and simple understanding of the ways of nature, it was possible to make a great deal out of nothing, turn waste and loss into gain. One of the incidental results of the experiments, he pointed out, is to prove that the world allows to go to waste almost unlimited supply of valuable fertilizer that most soils need, and the muck from the swamps and the leaves from forests. Carver's third big job, which continues unceasingly to this day, was to serve in the scientific pilot to the southern farmers in the face of disaster. That disaster was the coming of the boll weevil, an insect pest which attacked and devastated the cotton fields. 30 years ago, Carver witnessed the arrival of the boll weevil in Alabama. He saw an almost total destruction of the cotton crop. He set himself to two tasks. He would assist in the fighting of the pest, and he would preach a gospel of native money crops other than cotton. After study and thought and experiment, he decided that the southern farmer could get his money with more surety and with less damage to his soil by growing peanuts and sweet potatoes rather than attempting any other crop. Dr. Carver began to write bulletins proving his contentions. He made speeches arguing the beliefs. After a time, a number of the southern farmers increased their peanut and sweet potato acreage. And then, suddenly, and sadly, Dr. Carver awoke to what he had done. He had increased the supply without decreasing the demand. The peanuts and the sweet potatoes were rotting. The southern farmer was not only losing the money that he had hoped to make, but he was losing the cost of production, the cost of labor as well. Almost fiercely, the Negro scientist set out about work that the centuries will probably declare to be his greatest contribution to knowledge. He had made a great mistake. He felt that he had done a great personal injustice. Days and nights he spent in his laboratory seeking to develop new commercial uses for the peanut and the sweet potato. Slowly, one product at a time, this man forced nature to give up her secrets, and as each of them was learned, Dr. Carver gave them freely to the world, asking only that they be used to the benefit of mankind. He cares nothing about marketing his products, I was told. He merely discovers them, then gives them away to anyone who wants them. The results of his labor are found in hundreds of new byproducts, new uses for peanuts, peanut shells, and sweet potatoes. Incidentally, in developing new markets for peanuts, Dr. Carver has used to advantage his skill as a cook, which he acquired as a boy. He has prepared and published more than 100 table recipes for which peanuts are used. With these, you could prepare a whole 6-course dinner of peanuts, all the way from the soup to the savory. Inevitably, Dr. Carver's work in agriculture, in chemistry, and in other sciences brought him offers to leave Tuskegee and go elsewhere. One of these offers was made to Thomas A. Edison. One of the walls of Dr. Carver's office are 2 autographed pictures from Edison. He sent me one of them when he asked me to come to his laboratory and work with him, Dr. Carver explained. He sent me the other, the larger one, when I told him that my work was here in the South, and that I didn't think God wanted me to ever leave it. Another offer tempted the old Negro, him who once had been valued and traded for $300, tempted him with an annual salary of $100,000. He refused it. He stayed in Tuskegee, where his meager salary was quickly consumed by anonymously paying bills of worthy boys, both black and white, who were trying to get an education. He stayed in Tuskegee and continued to wear the old alpaca coat which himself so often mended, the black trousers which he has also frequently patched, the black shoes which are just a little too large for him, and ties, too, are expensive, so he knits his own from the fibers that he makes himself. Money means nothing to him, my friend told me. Some wealthy peanut growers in Florida were suffering terribly from the diseased crop. They sent Dr. Carver some specimens. He told them what was wrong and how to cure it. After his diagnosis and treatment had proved correct, they sent him a check for $100, promising that they would send him the same amount monthly as a retainer's fee. He sent the check back, telling them that God didn't charge them anything for growing the peanuts, and that he shouldn't charge them for anything for curing it. I had known Dr. Carver for 2 days when, at 10 o'clock one morning, he took off his spectacles to cover his microscope and said, "I would be greatly honored if you would come to my rooms with me. I should like to show you one of my pictures." As we started to walk the mile and a half from his office at the agricultural building to his rooms in one of the men's dormitories, I asked him about his music. "I haven't touched a piano in 20 years, he said. "I haven't even played my guitar. God didn't intend me to serve as a pianist." Dr. Carver believes intensely that God called him to serve humanity by making serviceable products out of waste products. He's an extremely devout man, though not at all ostentatiously pious. He regularly attends church, and "do you know," the minister confided me, "that he wears the whole alpaca coat even to church?" Indeed, he wears that coat on almost every occasion. Only once recently have I been able to get it off of him. At commencement in 1931, the Tuskegee Institute was to be presented the bronze plaque for Dr. Carver. The plaque was being given by a great commercial house, dealers in the peanut. It was a tribute to Dr. Carver's research. The authorities of the Institute argued until finally the old man consented to be present at the exercises. After a knockdown, drag-out quarrel, he promised to wear his academic cap and gown. The speaker presenting the plaque made a long and eloquent speech, after which he sat down. There was a terrific applause, and everyone looked at Dr. Carver, who was doing his best to hide behind a fan he had made out of corn husks and a turkey bone. The applause continued until finally Dr. Robert R. Moten, principal of the Institute, turned to Dr. Carver and called him for a speech. The old man promptly shriveled back into his robes. All that could be seen of him was heavily patched shoe wagging nervously. Dr. Moten repeated the request. Two professors bent over Dr. Carver, urging him to come out from behind his corn-shuck fan and address the audience. When finally he did appear, there was a storm of applause. He rose, untangled himself from his robes, and shambled to the front of the platform. For a moment, Dr. Carver fussed with the front of his gown. Then he gave up trying to arrange it properly and began his address. "I never wore one of these things before," he said, shaking a handful of his robes to the audience, "and I'll never wear them again." Fanning hard on his corn-shuck hand, he left the platform, went back to his laboratory, and completed an experiment by which he made potash from chinaberry ashes. On the morning that Dr. Carver and I started out on the walk from his rooms, we were interrupted by an 8-year-old boy who had caught a fluffy young wood thrush and brought it to Dr. Carver. The old man took the bird, soothed it, and with long black fingers stilled its feeble fluttering. Once the bird no longer darted his little yellow marquette about, Dr. Carver began to describe its habits, telling the lad how the bird lived, things it ate, where it loved best to sit and sing. The old man softly whistled a song to the bird. Now take it back and turn it loose, my boy. Take it back to its mother. It's terrible when a young bird is taken from its mother. You wouldn't want to be taken from your mother, would you? The lad shook his head. That's right, the great scientist looked away. Of course you wouldn't. None of us would. When at last we arrived at Dr. Carver's rooms, he unlocked the outer door and bowed me in. I'm just a little crowded here, he admitted, waving his arm toward the living room. That is, in reality, a confused combination of library, picture gallery, hothouse, and museum. The bookshelves from the floor almost to the ceiling. Books on geology, agriculture, botany, chemistry, physics, astronomy, butterflies, mushrooms, frogs, books in English, German, and other languages. In the corner are stacks of scientific journals. In the center of the room, and almost filling the place in this table, which is piled rocks and stones and stalagmites and stalactites, and scores of other formations known only to trained geologists. Outside the window is a great shelf on which 50 pots of plants with which Dr. Carver is constantly experimenting. On one wall of the room is a glass case, 4 feet wide and 6 feet high. It is filled with embroidery, tatting, and crochet work. Even an absolute layman can recognize their exceeding delicacy and beauty. But how do you find time to do it all? I asked. Chiefly because I made it a rule of my life to get up every morning at 4 o'clock. Winter and summer, awake at that hour, I get up. I go out into the woods, alone, there with the things I love most. I gather specimens and study the great lessons that nature is so eager to teach me. In the woods each morning, while most other persons are sleeping, I best hear and understand God's plan for me. I return to my laboratory at 9 o'clock, and I work there all day, every night. And regardless of what kind of entertainment or celebration is going on, I go to bed at 9 o'clock. He hesitated for a moment, then went on. But don't talk as if I accomplished very much. What I've done may seem like a lot, though he shook his head sorrowfully and turned away. Although I know it's mighty little compared to all that I should have done, and all I want to do. Dr. Carver's belittlement of his own achievements is an obstructive indication of his own sincere humility. A few years ago, he made a trip to Washington. After he returned to Tuskegee, said nothing about what had happened. A week passed before we learned what he had done. An official of the Institute told me. We heard about it from some newspaper clippings that were sent us. When the Holy Smokes tariff bill was being considered, Southern farmers sent plea after plea to Congress asking that the peanut be named as an article of which import duty was not to be charged. Congress saw no reason for exceeding claims, but the Ways and Means Committee granted a hearing and named a day. On that day, a dozen men appeared before the committee, each man in his turn consuming his allotted 10 minutes. In the background, standing alone, Dr. Carver, with his trembling hands, awaited his time to speak. Last on the list of speakers, he finally shuffled forward to address congressmen who were thoroughly tired of hearing about peanuts. The old man took his place behind the table, where stood scores of bottles and cases containing products he had made from the peanuts. Smiling his humble smile, he explained that he had been brought to Washington by a group of southern peanut growers. He apologized for taking up the time to his hearers. He thanked them for listening, and simply, and with an occasional reference to God, he told the tired congressman about the story of the peanuts. He told the congressman of how he had asked God, "What is a peanut, and why did you make it?" Then he told how he had sought his answer to the question, and how in his searching he had discovered products ranging from face powder to chocolate wafers. As he talked, he pointed to each product that he, a humble Negro before them, had made in his Alabama laboratory. Exactly at the end of 10 minutes, Dr. Carver thanked the committee for allowing him to appear before them, bowed, and started to shuffle back to his lone place in the far corner. But the congressmen would not let him go. They demanded that he come back and continue his story. He spoke for an hour and 45 minutes before the most important committee of Congress. And when he was finished, the committee adjourned to the next room and wrote subpoenas into the tariff bill of the United States. You love flowers, don't you, Dr. Carver? I asked as he showed me, in his rooms, some of the strangely beautiful flowers that he... There is no greater beauty, he said. Wait, I'll show you how I try to save my life. He went into the bedroom that he tends himself. He was never married, and I heard him unwrapping a parcel. I knew that he loved flowers, and I've seen him touch them, but he is never seen without some kind of flower in his buttonhole. He came back into the living room, bringing a picture she had placed in the battered easel. And then he came to the stand by me while I looked at it further. It was a study of 9 roses. I saw them 30 years ago, he explained. I painted them 2 months ago. In all his paintings, Dr. Carver arranges the flowers as he wants them, looks at them for a moment, and gives the flowers away and never sees them again. Surely this isn't brushwork, is it? I asked, examining the painting. No, sir, he said. It's done with dry colors. I made this paint from the clays near here. Alabama is rich with good clays. I do the painting with my fingers. But about these paints you made, won't they fade? No, sir, they won't fade. They've been in these Alabama hills a mighty long time without fading. They won't fade merely because I've taken them out and painted roses with them. Why should they fade? No one can adequately report the strange feeling of and spiritual bewilderment that is what one consistently feels while they are with this unusual man. Nor can one even imitate one's regret at the time of saying goodbye, when Dr. Carver, his smile itself a Godspeed, places his trembling hand on your shoulder and says, Goodbye, my boy, goodbye. May God bless you. It is a benediction from simple and kindly and noble hearts. Okay. So, hour and 43. Just 2 more. Oh, practice on this. The downside about reading old books is sometimes the prints are hard to read. This book is it's 1948 edition, is it? Yeah, this is a 1948 copy. Okay. Got a poem. Daniel Boone's Last Look Westward by Cale Young Rice. I'm only 80, my sons, and a few fill the measure up, and so I shouldn't be shut here like an old hound by the fire, to dream of deeds I still have work to do. Maybe I have performed enough for one man, for there's Kentucky's cut out from wilderness, and sewed fast to the states by law and order, which I'm not saying isn't good for them. We like putting in harness with our neighbors, but I keep seeing trails running to westward. and northwest Indian-footed trails, but no white man has ever pierced the eye through. Beyond them are pirate lands and prairie lands and forests, which settlers coming after me could scalp. And so, silver is the game they're seeking. And the Almighty means my eyes to see them, else he'd have made my sight dim and roomy. By now, and there's deer or bears with the gambles, before my gun and goes away, so say. That's kind of a shiftless maybe, I'll allow, to want to keep always beyond the settlements, but not in them. 10 near families is too many, but the Lord never meant the plow to be my instrument. I get to the end of a furrow, there's the wilderness waiting, all create, and I just have to find a path across it. As your ma there knows, though I never could tell her the reason, till they took Kentucky in. And then I saw them coming to be wise with animals and savages more. Love of powder and shot, and that God used my axe to hew a realm out. And there's more realms to be hewed. God's grinding the axes. I'll tell you that. For young Lewis and Clark, sons of my two old friends, are coming tomorrow, with unblazed trails to the northwest in their eyes, and who knows but that land's as big as Kentucky, and Illinois too, that they're coming. For more than to look at an old hound by the fire. There's one run in me yet, and if I died somewhere upon the far new trail with them, there's a coffin board saved, and I'd sleep better. Mr. Moth, this time, wouldn't be willing to pack my kit and draw the latch of the door. She won't, eh? There's daughter in here, I reckon, dreaming, put a fresh log on, let be. Young Lewis and Clark will need a manny like me, though, before they use the Northwest into the world. That was hard to get through. I read a letter from Thomas Jefferson earlier. Let's read one Robert E. Lee. Letter to his daughter by Robert Edward Lee. Lexington, Virginia, December 21st, 1866. My precious life, I was very glad to receive your letter on the 15th inst., and to learn that you were well and happy. May you always be as much so as consistent as your welfare here and hereafter is my daily prayer. I was much pleased, too, that, while enjoying the kindness of your friends, you were not forgotten. Experience will teach you that, notwithstanding all appearances to the contrary, you will never receive as much love as is felt but for you by your father and mother. That lives through absence, difficulties, and time. Your own feelings will teach you how it should be returned and appreciated. I want to see you very much and miss you at every turn. And I am glad that this opportunity for you to be with those who, I know, will do all their power to give you a pleasure. I hope you will also find time to read and improve your mind. Read history, works of truth, not novels and romances. Get correct views of life, and learn to see the world in its true light. They will enable you to live pleasantly, to do good, and, when summoned away, to leave without regret. Your friends here inquire constantly of you, and wish for your return. Mrs. White and Mrs. McElwee particularly regret your absence, and the former sends special thanks to your letter of remembrance. We get on in our usual way. Agnes takes good care of us, and is very thoughtful and attentive. She is not great velocity, but is systematic and quiet. After today, the mornings will begin to lengthen a little, and her trials to lessen. It is very cold, and the ground is covered with 6 inches of snow, and the mountains, as far as the eye can reach in every direction, elevate their white crests in monuments of winter. This is the night for supper and for the repairs of the Episcopal Church. Your mother and sisters are busy with their contributions. It is to take place at the hotel, and your brother, cousins, and father are to attend. On Monday night, 24th, the supper of the Presbyterian Church is to be held in the lecture room. They are to have music and every attraction. I hope both may be productive and be good. But you know the Episcopalians are few and small returns, and I must leave your sisters a description of these feasts, and also an account of the operation of the reading club. As far as I can judge, it is a great institution for the discussion of apples and chestnuts, but is quite innocent of the pleasures of literature. It, however, brings the young people together and promotes sociability and conversation. Our feline companions are flourishing. Young Baxter is growing in the gracefulness and flavor, and gives cat-like evidences of future worth. He possesses the fashionable color of moonlight on the water, apparently a dingy hue in the kitchen, and is apparently strictly aristocratic in appearance and conduct. Tom, surnamed the Nipper, from the manner in which he slaughters our enemies, the rats and the mice, is admired for his gravity and sobriety, as well as for his strict attention to the pursuits of his race. They both feel for your absence sorely. Traveler and Custis are both well, and pursue their usual dignified gait and habits, and are not led away from the frivolous entertainments of lectures and concerts. All send united love, and all wish for your return. Remember me most kindly to cousins Eleanor and George, John, Mary, Ida, and all at Myrtle Grove, to other kind friends when you meet them. Mrs. Grady carried yesterday to Mr. Charles Kerr in Baltimore a small package for you. Be careful of your health, and do not eat more than half of the plum puddings cousin Eleanor has prepared for Christmas. I'm glad to hear that you are fattening, and I hope you will reach 125 pounds. Think always of your father, who loves you dearly. R. E. Lee. P.S. 22D. Rob arrived last night with Lucy Long. He thinks it too bad you're away. He has not seen you for 2 years. R. E. Lee. Hey, Talbot. What are you doing tonight? Ready or not? Okay, so what's ready or not? I don't think I heard that. Yeah, I'm reading a nice old book of even older stories. It's last year. Okay. Just thinking ready or not, it sounds like it'd be a game of tag. Switch it. Let's try it. I usually just do 2 hours of reading. And I was looking at the next story I had in this book, and it's only going to be a half-hour read if I even tried it. So put off on that one until next week. Sketchy crosses. Hey, thanks for bringing people in. So is it a multi-person group one, or is it just one that you play by yourself? Okay. And that would make more sense to do it as a team game. Fix my model. Heck no. Such a delay. I need to fix where my camera is. I'm looking the wrong direction of the chat. What is with me today? It's this Echoes from the Southland that I've been reading. Actually, a very old textbook. This edition of the printing is 1948, but like the letter from Robert E. Lee that I just read, it says it's from 1904. I have to say what the date was on it. This was added to the book in 1904. It was written in 1866. I find old stuff to read. random stuff on my desk. That's a 2-hour mark, so I was going to think about seeing who was on to raid. So reading. Considering story time. Not a surprise. Let's see. Let's see. I was trying to find someone to raid. Seems like the penguin. And thanks for coming in. Always nice to have any kind of raid, really. Uh, Again, thanks for popping in. See you next time. Have a good night.